Hey and welcome, I'm Hammeh and we have Mercy's new short story, Valkyrie, that's just released, along with the reveal of what will be a Dr. Ziegler skin. In this video, we're going to go through 10 quick key Overwatch lore learnings and Mercy story learnings that we got from Valkyrie. And comment below with what you think about the short story. Go read it if you haven't already, it's linked in the description below. Timecodes in the description to skip. Let's get stuck in. At number 10, we learned a lot more about Mercy's upbringing and the sad circumstances around her parents passing. Now, we've always known that Mercy is an orphan. We learn in Valkyrie her parents were killed by an airstrike whilst volunteering at a local hospital. There were attacks on Switzerland as the first Omnic crisis swept through Europe. Now, this has affected Mercy a lot and it's mentioned several times in the story. We know that she was close to the Lindholm family for many years, the short story of Operation White Dome with Torbjorn writing to his wife Ingrid, and also various voice lines between Torb and Mercy and Anna's origin trailer all suggest this. However, we have another example when she's offered the head of research position by Morrison in a flashback when Mercy joined Overwatch. Alta inte guld som glimmer was one of Torbjorn's favourite phrases. All that glitters is not gold. I questioned everything. It was a habit I always had, even when I was a child. But my education and perhaps my proximity to Torbjorn had sharpened it. It was mostly to my benefit, it helped me to do the science, but it did give people a certain prickly opinion of me. The loss of Mercy's parents also strikes her at the end of the story when she finds out that the two children she saves during its course are actually orphans as well. It affects her perception of a lot of things, but we'll talk about that later. At number 9, Mercy's recruitment to Overwatch. Now, Jack Morrison, in a flashback that Mercy recalls when she was joining Overwatch, says that it was 10 years since the end of the Omnic crisis. Now, from various different sources, we know that Overwatch brought roughly 2 decades, 20 years of world peace to the world. We know that from the present day of recall, it's maybe 6, perhaps 7 years since Overwatch roughly fell. And we know that Mercy in the present day, or certainly at Overwatch's launch, was 37 years old. So stick all of that together. Mercy was probably recruited roughly at the age of 21 or so. Now, I've always known she's been a prodigy. Morrison, in the story, also says that he'd known her for a long time already and promised her resources and support to help revolutionise her field of healthcare, nanobiotic technology, that she'd just published a paper on. Mercy was hoping it would revolutionise the way that healthcare was distributed around the world and reduce the barriers towards people getting healthcare. In the story, Morrison recruits Angela because he knew that he had more than enough soldiers and he wanted, in his words, thinkers, dreamers, people who want to make the world a better place, and to give her the opportunity to revolutionise her field. Even then, Mercy had concerns. She made it very, very clear that she wanted to focus on the civilian and peacetime applications of her work. She did not want to create ways for Overwatch commanders to send people into danger. And Morrison agreed to this at the time. So confident in Morrison from their past shared friendship, Dr. Angela Ziegler accepted. At number 8, Mercy's life since Overwatch. Well, in Mercy's time in Overwatch, we know sadly the world became a more dangerous place. The organisation fell, the Swiss HQ mysteriously went up in flames, with perhaps a fight between Morrison and Reyes being rumoured to be something to do with that, but this story also comments on that, which we'll discuss in a bit. Suffice to say, Mercy's time in Overwatch did not go the way that she really anticipated. She, since Overwatch, has been trying to be doing things in places uncontroversial and helpful, preferring to be known as Dr. Angela Ziegler, not Mercy. Now, in the last 6 years, she spent a couple of years in Cairo. We've seen her maybe in somewhere deserty. Maybe that's where she got the letter from Genji that she also mentions in this story in the Reflections comic. She's also been in Poland, South Korea, and Venezuela. Venezuela is mentioned twice because apparently they were digging people out after a storm there. Projects she dedicated her life to have either been scrapped, sold, or reassigned out of her control, according to her, and she never managed to make her nanotechnology global breakthrough in healthcare that she wanted to. Mercy, or I should say Angela, doesn't want to be known as Mercy anymore. Being a prominent ex-Overwatch official is not the sort of experience on your CV people are looking for. She snaps at Morrison when he asks her why she's in Egypt. In the story, Morrison and Anna come to Mercy for help due to Morrison's wound that he sustained in the events of the Anna short story Bastard. In the story Valkyrie, we also learned that Angela never really wanted to be Mercy. The Valkyrie suit was proof that the technology that she'd made actually worked and could be used in a field context. She did, however, know how others saw her, how her teammates wanted her to be there, and in her own words, Dr. Ziegler withdrew and Mercy took her place. At number 7, we get an insight into Mercy's attitude to Overwatch right now. Now, her time in Overwatch hadn't gone the way she wanted. She is kind of angry when she sees Ana's darts as Ana rifles through her flat in Cairo for tea. It's an adaptation of her tech that had been made without her approval, and indeed we've already seen a bit of the debate around this in the teaser for Ana way back when Ana was introduced as a new hero, due to Mercy's comments that this is not a use of her technology that she really approved of. Angela is also guilty at the legacy of Overwatch when it fell apart and left problems around the world. In her words, Overwatch was responsible for suffering in a lot of places, according to her, and particularly Egypt, hence why she returned there. She cites it directly in the story as a place that Overwatch caused issues. In addition to this, Angela is irritated when seeing Jack and Ana alive. She says to herself in the story she should be happy, but they're a manifestation of something that she was or had been trying to escape from, the legacy of Overwatch over her life. Although she acknowledges later in the story, at best it was an optimistic goal. Mercy also doesn't agree with Winston's recall, and it's interesting the way in which she phrases it, although she's having a bit of an argument with Morrison as she looks for medical equipment. On Winston's recall, they have a similar thought. Morrison thinks that the people who came after Overwatch originally won't let Winston keep his new recall alive. Mercy on Winston said, Winston saw that the problems in the world were growing, and he saw Overwatch as the solution for everything. I don't think Winston ever questioned why things had fallen apart. He loved it and needed it too much to see how it had damaged and changed us all. Being in that room with Jack and Ana only reinforced to me that we were all still broken. Doing the same thing as we'd done in the past would only lead to another disaster. The world didn't need that. Winston's heart was in the right place, but that didn't mean that he was right. At number 6, we learn a bit more about Sojourn, now obviously introduced BlizzCon 2019 Overwatch 2 gameplay trailer as a new hero, key and vital to the story of Overwatch 2. Mercy knows of other different bits of what Sojourn has been up to and is doing. She mentions that she knows that Lena is acting, she knows that Reinhardt is dragging Brigitte around on his adventures, refers to the interaction between Mercy and Reinhardt that was very early in Overwatch's life that I covered in my Reinhardt lore voice lines and interactions video way back when. And finally she mentions that Sojourn is in Canada keeping a low profile, and we know that Sojourn is of course Canadian. The Toronto map push is coming to Overwatch 2. We also hear about Sojourn's strength. Now, there's a part when Mercy is trying to rescue some children in the midst of a big battle as Talon are fighting Helix Security to try and attack the Anubis AI facility, a fight in which Jack Morrison and Ana also get involved. That Mercy mentions she needs strength to help move rocks and things that are covering her way and covering the people she's trying to save. She mentions that Genji, Sojourn or Reinhardt would be very useful here. Now do remember, of course, we've seen Sojourn in the Overwatch 2 gameplay trailer having 2 cybernetic arms. In Ana's origin trailer, we see her as being very much intact. And in, of course, the events of Storm Rising, we also hear her have a dialogue with Genji about the nature of cybernetics and asking him, when you look at me, do you see Sojourn or not? So what happened to Sojourn between Ana's origin trailer photo and the present day? It'll be fascinating to find out. Last but not least, before Ana and Jack leave at the end of the story, trying to chase down the ever-elusive Gabriel Reyes that they now know is alive too, Ana has a discussion with Angela about how, really, the soldiers, the old soldiers like Ana, like Jack, probably even like Reinhardt, never really knew how to do the peacetime piece of Overwatch and try and change the world, just saving it instead. That they were kind of creatures of a different age, of a different time. She also mentions that you, Lena, Sojourn all see things in a different way. So Sojourn, 3 times in this story, really being set up for her future role within Overwatch. At number 5, we get another different perspective on Soldier 76 or Jack Morrison and learn a few interesting things about him. Firstly, in the flashback in his office, he enjoys reading a lot about different military generals and also is a keen player of chess, or certainly has a board in his office. But outside of that, some more interesting things, both in terms of his mindset and how he appears to other people right now, and that he doesn't actually know what happened about Switzerland. In a discussion with Angela, he says that he's close to finding the truth about what happened to Overwatch, Talon and Switzerland, in his words, about everything, and that was his new mission. Now, Mercy says that the fervour that crept into his voice sounded like obsession, and earlier in the story she says that she thought the biggest injuries were actually in his head. Assuming that he might mean the destruction of Overwatch's Swiss HQ, about Switzerland, that was reported once in the lore as having maybe a confrontation between Morrison and Reyes as having something to do with it. So if Jack doesn't know what happened about Switzerland, then that's clearly not the case. Or is he talking about something else? An interesting question there, reflecting on one of the very earliest blogs, Fading Glory, on the trail of Jack Morrison, which released when Overwatch the game actually released back in 2016. Obviously, covering Overwatch lore for sort of 4 or 5 years. At the very beginning, everyone, including myself, took things very, very literally that we read. Since sort of before Overwatch's launch and onwards, the concept of unreliable narrators has been introduced, where we question the points of view of all of the different sources we're reading, just like you would if you're a historian, including our characters themselves and their motivations too. As for the rest of Morrison's mission, he says, "Let Winston play the hero. I'll do what needs to be done. Rez, Ogundimu, Maximilian, Viali, Sombra, O'Duran, and the rest of them." He's going after them all. At number 4, we get some reasonable insight into how Mercy's Valkyrie suit is actually put together and works, how it functions with its healing properties as well. Now, it's Torbjorn constructed, certainly in terms of pieces of the armour. She makes a note to thank Torbjorn because some rocks and debris fall on her when she's trying to save children, and the armour actually saves her. Well, we know that it's made of a breastplate. It's got a communications and scanning visor, which according to her is the kind of really key thing in it. That's, I assume, her halo. Then biotic charges, her staff as the delivery module, and then there's also a handheld scanning module she uses to scan Hanan, a girl's leg, as well as a sonic scanning module that she uses to scan the girl's brother's leg as well. There's also a propulsion system. Unsurprisingly, Mercy talks a lot about flying, talking about how it can change people's perspectives. Tracer as a pilot, Winston coming from his spaceship down to Earth, astronauts in space, and how looking at the world from space changes their viewpoint on things. But she says nobody has flown like I have, as she flies in her Valkyrie suit above Anna and Jack, soaring over Egypt as she then sees the Talon against Helix battle that Jack and Anna throw themselves into. She's not looking after those two. She is using her visor, scanning the crowd, looking for civilians and trying to help the general public. The visor is described in action, dotted with the life signatures of people in the area, a loud insistent mess that she had to somehow try and make sense of. She then finds some children that need help. When she meets Hanan and tries to heal her, a biotic stream comes out of her staff. A golden glow, motes of light landed on her skin. She said it's a little hot and it might hurt a bit, but then it knitted the girl's wounds closed. The hand grips apparently on Mercy's staff are indented, according to her own words, into the shape of her hands where she clutched it in desperate situations. Another cool little detail when Hanan, the kid, has been healed is that Mercy says, "Oh, it's nanobiotics, it's not magic." And then the kid turns around and goes, "Oh, like little machines?" And then Mercy turns around and goes, "No, not quite like that." There you go. Nanobots deconfirmed there. There's also an interesting note on the power of the Valkyrie. When they find Hanan's brother, he has what seems to be a broken or fractured arm. Now, the nanobiotic stream of the Valkyrie suit seems to kind of stabilise him. There's this heat effect. He sort of seems to be stabilised, but it's not really healed him. And it seems as though that he needs to still be taken to and get a lot more attention. So it seems like this technology of Mercy's can knit up things quite quickly, can stabilise people quite quickly, but it doesn't 100% perhaps entirely make up for in-universe, in canon, sort of hospital, surgery, medical attention of that form perhaps. Be interesting to see if that changes. At number 3, we see a lot more about Mercy in battle with her suit as well. When she puts it on, she can feel the signs of damage that it had from her time in the field before. She puts the clasps on, and when the power turns on, it moulds onto her. She also has contact lenses that filter the smoke as she flies through the war zone, which I thought was a quite nice little touch in the story. She also then mentions that battles are a blur to her. The attacks and tactics, they're all tuned out to a low buzz in her mind as she focuses on saving lives. Now, her heads-up visor and display that previously were described as sort of the core of her suit seem to be a very complex set of life signatures of people in the area that she has to try and work out as she's flying around. She actually isolates Jack and Anna as they exchange fire with hulking Talon soldiers. So Mercy in battle, unless she's working with an Overwatch strike team on a specific mission, in this kind of context she's just flying around trying to save and help people almost. Jack and Anna are looking after themselves. The power in the suit is interesting for Mercy in battle because we see a few examples of her when she's saving the children, of what she can kind of do and not do on her own. Now, when she's lifting rocks, she says that they're very heavy and that she wouldn't have been able to help in Venezuela if it wasn't for the power of her Valkyrie suit. So the powering of the suit helps her with activities to a degree. This could also explain why she's able to sort of fly around and pick up Genji, and then also in the Overwatch 2 things we see her pick up May as well. Mercy also mentions that the suit in of itself is very heavy and it has certain limits. When she's rushing with the two children towards the exit trying to save them, at one point when a mortar destroy some of the buildings, she uses the outstretched wings of the Valkyrie to cover herself and the children from debris flying around. Afterwards, one of the wings is creaking, it seems to be broken, and the power in her systems are offline. So the Valkyrie is, although very, very powerful and very useful, quite fragile. It's not designed to be armour in a sense for sort of taking huge blows, as the debris of a mortar flew and destroyed the building that she was in. At number 2, Talon's ever more bold fighting in public and just public action seemingly without consequence. So in this story, Mercy is helping out Jack and Anna when suddenly they hear that Talon is fighting Helix Security or attacking the Anubis AI facility. Now, we've seen Talon from Watchpoint Gibraltar, Recall, the Museum Cinematic, Old Soldiers, so much more, all of the activities that they've been doing everywhere, and also, of course, in the events of Bastard, the short story as well. Now, we see in the story that Raptor are wearing soldiers of Helix Security over Anubis in a pitched battle with Talon, and it doesn't really seem to matter as to the civilian casualties or people caught in the crossfire. The Raptora suit, of course, being the suit that Farah has been trying out and using for Helix. Now, it seems that Talon are literally just fighting Helix to get to the Anubis facility, whether this is a follow-up on the information that Hakim and Reaper were talking about in the events of the Old Soldiers comic. It'll be interesting to see. In that comic, Reaper, when talking with Hakim, a local mercenary leader working with Talon, said that Helix will have a weakness. They don't know what they're protecting. Maybe this is Talon actually going after what Helix are protecting in a bigger way. As Jack, Anna and Angela head over there, Angela is intent on saving lives rather than fighting, and she's not really even looking after Jack and Anna in the battle. Talon dropships we've also seen flying over London in the events of Alive, where Widowmaker killed Tay Carter Mondata. They apparently have no care for collateral damage as usual, and interestingly we also see Reyes or Reaper fighting in public, as are Anna and Jack. Morrison dove in with abandon while Anna watched from above. Talon's soldiers with their red and white masks were everywhere, pinning down the Helix soldiers in blue. Suddenly a series of explosions tore through the night, and my eyes, Mercy's, fixated on a dark mass, darker than night. A black figure emerged from it, a hailstorm of gunfire exploded from its centre, and the two old soldiers raced for cover, out of my sight. "What is that?" I breathed. "Gabriel." So the next stop is apparently Europe, where Reaper was meant to be heading, and Morrison says that they may actually see some old friends. I wonder who Morrison and Anna might run into in the next short story or in the next leg of the Overwatch lore. And number 1, last but not least, why Mercy answered the recall. So we get a bit more of an answer to this. Now, Mercy's always sounding very anti-Overwatch in her voice lines and interactions, realising that the children that she saves in the short, however, are now orphans like her. Mercy realises that the vast reserve of heroism she once possessed might not be as empty as she thought. Although struggle, doubt and controversy wore her down, Mercy says the fire that burned in her when she joined Overwatch still burns. Knowing that her battle wasn't over, at the end of her story, in her own words, she says that along with her catchphrase, "Heroes never die." So there we go, 10 cool lore learnings from Mercy's Valkyrie story. How did you find the story? Have you read it? I will do an in-depth analysis of it even longer. Do keep an eye out for that video in the next couple of days. And check out my playlist here where you can discover everything to do with Overwatch lore interactions, voice lines, short story analysis, comic analysis, animated shorts, and everything. Overwatch 2 and Overwatch for the last 4 years. Every single hero, all right here. Thanks to my patrons on Patreon who help make my videos possible. If you'd like to see more, check out patreon.com/Hammeh. Cheers for tuning in. I've been Hammeh. Take it easy.